You are listening to Revolution Talk Radio. Welcome to the revolution.
All right, welcome everybody. We are back for another episode of Revolution Talk Radio. I am horror author James Hershey Jr. and joining me tonight is old boy James Ash. How you doing, old boy?
Pretty good. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. I'm thinking what we're going to do tonight is we're going to continue the really cool conversation that we were having Wednesday night on our last episode of Revolution Talk Radio. We were talking at that time about dragons and giants and stuff like that. So I think we're going to continue on that theme of dragons and mythical creatures. Old boy sent me earlier today a YouTube video that was the top 10 mythical creatures that are actually real. It was something like that. Was that the title, old boy?
Yeah, I think it was pretty much close. Something like that.
So basically what this thing was it was a video, you know, just like every other top 10 video you've ever seen on YouTube pretty much, is it counted from 10 down to 1, and it had these different video clips of supposed mythological creatures caught on tape. Everything from, you know, dragons to werewolves to like a little goblin-like looking thing.
Gnome.
Yeah, gnome, the unicorns, the whole nine. Most of the video, to be completely honest with everybody listening, it looked fake as hell to me. Most of it looked silly. There was one bit of footage of a unicorn that was like with a bunch of wild horses that were out in like a field somewhere, and that one looked kind of real. And then there was one of a dragon flying across the sky that looked pretty real, but that very well could have been edited footage too. What did you think?
They said that those are supposedly all been, other than the one with a dragon where the guy's cut in the stomach, that was a snake dressed up like a dragon. But the one where he's flying around, that was in China, and they said they actually looked at that footage, and they said that would be almost impossible to fake it because it was flying around for he recorded it for minutes. It was like 5-10 minutes. It wasn't 2 seconds and you didn't see it. It actually has footage and pictures of what it looks like. They don't know if it was a dragon or a pterodactyl. There's an argument on it. But if you also seen the other one they have where a dragon's flying around, and they showed like a thunder with a dragon in the sky. You seen that one? The one where it's flying around in China, that's kind of hard to fake, they were saying. I've seen that one before. I think that was real. I don't know if it was a dragon. It might have been pterodactyl. It could have been something else, but that damn thing was probably real because that was almost impossible to fake. They said. I seen people actually study that one, and they said that's almost impossible because they kept flying around for minutes. Now the other ones I could say, yeah, either it was like a bull with an extra horn. They were trying to say it was a unicorn. I'm like, come on, dude, that's just happens sometimes. That's not a unicorn. Now the one where they had the white unicorn running around, that kind of looked real to me. Now with the werewolves, those were kind of weird.
Yeah, they look kind of cheesy. And the one they had two unicorns. They had the one in the field that I thought looked like it might actually be real. You know what I mean? That could actually be a real animal. And then the second one they had, it was a white horse that a woman dressed as a fairy was riding around a kid's birthday party. And this horse had a horn on its head. And they were saying, did they capture and tame a unicorn and all this? And I'm thinking, well, if it was a real unicorn, then the people at the party wouldn't be walking around like it was no big deal. They'd be like, oh my God, it's a freaking unicorn. You know what I mean? But everybody was just walking around like, yeah, look at this cheesy crap.
It was probably, like I said, more of a freakish thing with a bull. It looked like a cow with a third horn, and that was kind of stupid. I thought doesn't mean it's a unicorn because it has an extra horn. I know what they're saying, but a lot of people don't realize the unicorn isn't just a beautiful white creature. So it also means, it has another meaning to it. But yeah, that was kind of stupid. Now the werewolf, that one was pretty funny. It looked like they took the movie from Underworld and put one of the werewolves in it. It was so stupid.
Yeah, because its legs were crazy looking. Its legs were like super long, and they bent in a weird way. It looked, that dude that shot his old lady through the door of the bathroom, that was a runner and had those goofy metal legs, those weird looking bendy metal legs. That's exactly what it looked like. For everybody listening, that is what the werewolf's legs look like, except for with fur on them. It was really ridiculous looking.
And then they had the one where they had some creature running around I was like, come on, dude. It was somebody in a black fur suit running around and making himself look like a werewolf. It was so stupid. Those ones I don't believe. Now, I saw I didn't see all of it. I got to see the dragons. Those were really interesting. The one at the end, that's almost impossible to say that was fake. That was crazy to see that much footage of something, because they already had another one where they was flying around in the city of New York, I think it was, or somewhere in Chicago. But I know the other one was in LA. They show a giant dragon in the sky, and I don't know. That dragon one was pretty crazy. Did you see the Mexico with the gnome runs by out of nowhere? That
looked almost like it was a remote control car with something over top of it. Because when it ran, it didn't have the bounce up and down of the shoulders that would indicate that something was actually running. How they would dip. It just kind of went straight, like it was a remote control car that they just put like a Halloween decoration on top of and just ran into frame real quick. That's kind of what it looked like to me.
Yeah, it looked really fake to me. I don't know if I believe that, but they have found fairies, and I read something that they did DNA and they found out they weren't human, and they weren't fake. They found a skeleton, and so I don't know. I mean, I think there's some it would be really hard to be fake on all these. Ant-Man just tried to call me. Sorry about that, guys. And I really think some of these stories are real. Majority of them probably fake.
I want to do an update real quick. We'll get back to this, but I want to do an update on our show Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday's show we were talking about the Nephilim, which is the giants from the Bible.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny because I hadn't done a lot of research on this like right before the show, because I usually don't, unless it's something that I don't know a lot about. But I knew a good deal about the Nephilim from the Bible. So it was one of those spur-of-the-moment shows, because we actually had a different show planned, but then Eric got called away to his job. He works for hospice. So we just decided on the fly, like a couple minutes before we went on the air, that we were going to do the Nephilim. So I had zero prep time for it. So we just went by memory and what we knew, right? After we got off the air, I thought, let me look this up a little bit, because this was an interesting show, and it was an interesting topic, and I wondered how much more information was out there that I didn't know, because I had never really researched the Nephilim before. So I got on YouTube and stuff and was watching videos and doing some research online, and I messaged Old Boy like an hour or hour and a half, something like that, after the show was over, and I was like, oh my God, dude. And I was telling him all this stuff. Apparently, over in Afghanistan in 2002, there was a 15-foot tall red-headed giant with 6 fingers that took out a squad of our troops, and they sent another squad out to look for them, and this thing came out of the cave at them, and they just shot the living hell out of it. It ended up stabbing one of the guys named Dan. I don't know what his last name was. His first name was Dan, one of the Marines. He stabbed him with this like big spear thing he had, and the rest of the Marines shot the hell out of him and killed him. And they had actual interview with some of the Marines that were in that squad that killed the giant, and then they had an interview I saw with the actual chopper pilot that flew the giant away, because they brought in a cargo net and they rolled the big old thing into the cargo net and they flew it away. And then they had another interview later on with the pilot, the Air Force pilot that flew the C-130 that flew the giant back to the States to be put in some secret facility somewhere. I don't know where it ended up. But it was amazing because, I mean, here you are, you can actually listen to the people that went through the experience, and they're members of our military, you know what I mean? And so apparently these things still exist, so that really made me start thinking, oh my God, these things aren't all dead, you know what I mean? Like I thought they were. Because I thought maybe some remnants of DNA existed, and that's why we have people like the Big Show and stuff like that. People that grow a lot larger than the rest of us because there's still a little remnant of that DNA left. But apparently there's still 15-foot or bigger giants that are still out here, because that was not the only case. In doing research after the show, there's been multiple skeletons found when they do digs and stuff. There is footage from World War II in Japan of this Japanese giant that a normal sized man doesn't even come up to his waist, and this dude is humongous. And it wasn't just a picture. I mean, it was video of him walking around in a parade and standing around with people and stuff and talking, and it blew me away, man. So I wanted to give that update to the show, because if I would have seen all that stuff before the show, I definitely would have included that in the show, because it was fascinating stuff. So I urge everybody to get on YouTube after the show tonight and just type in giants or type in Nephilim, either one, and just check it out, man, because there's a lot of really cool stuff out there, and you'll really learn a lot. And what this whole experience has really shown me, I've always been a guy that believes in cryptic animals like Bigfoot, Loch Ness, stuff like that. I love that kind of stuff. I'm really into this stuff. But it's really brought home the lesson to me that there's a lot more stuff out there than we even realize is out there, A lot of those things that go bump in the night, a lot of the stories you were told as a kid that you think are fairy tales, a lot of that stuff actually exists. And so that's kind of where we are on this show, is we want to talk about some of the other things out there, like werewolves and vampires and mermaids and unicorns and all this kind of stuff, and do they exist? Like on the subject of mermaids, did you see a couple years ago, old boy, they did 2 different specials on Animal Planet that they were called something along the lines of Mermaid Fact or Fiction, or Mermaids, Are They Real, or something like that. But there was 2 different shows. Did you see those?
Well, I know the one they said one was just for TV. I know they said some of it was exaggerated because I looked it up. The other one was something, fact or fiction. The mermaid shows, Are They Real? And like they had like some mermaid on the thing, but they said that one wasn't real. But I know the other one was more real, they said, than the other one, because I know the other one is, how TV do, they put it on to make people watch it, so they exaggerate 90% of it. So but yeah, I know what you're talking about with the mermaids. That's another interesting story I've always caught my eye. But yeah, I did watch it though. Yeah, the one where the guy was saying there's a school of mermaids that live in the ocean, and he actually shot one or something, he says, when he was underwater with one of those spear guns. I remember him talking something about it. It was so long ago, I don't remember. It was a couple years ago.
Well, on the
4 or 5 years.
On the second show, okay, they had a scientist on that ran an underwater sub, like a deep sea sub, that one of those ones that would go down looking for like the giant squid and stuff like that. Okay, this isn't like a make-believe guy. This isn't a TV thing. This was an actual deep sea scientist, and they showed footage from his sub of a mermaid that swam right up to the window. I mean, it was just plain as day and just real as hell. And the thing that struck me about it is it wasn't your normal looking mermaid you would think of. When you think of mermaid, you think of hot chick, flowing hair, big boobs, fish tail, right? That's what everybody thinks of as a mermaid. This thing looked like something out of a damn horror movie. It looked more like the creature from the Black Lagoon than it looked like the standard mermaid we're used to seeing. You know what I mean? It was scary looking. Now, it had the mermaid-like tail, but it was just a scary looking creature. And they showed another bit of footage that was from an underwater oil rig that came from an oil company, and it was footage that they have cameras down there on the base of the oil rig where it's underwater, so that they can check the the lines and check all that stuff without having to go down every time, and you actually see some mermaids swimming around down there up by the camera. There was actual footage. And those two pieces of footage, they really struck me as real. Now, they had a bunch of stuff from YouTube and a bunch of stuff that was obviously fake crap that they said, hey, look at this. We don't know what this is, but this is online, so look at it. But those two pieces of footage that they showed, the one from the oil rig and the one from the scientist deep sea sub, those two pieces of footage were unbelievable. And you can probably find that show on YouTube, I would guess, because you can find most stuff like that on YouTube. But if you can get the chance to check it out, it was done on Animal Planet, and it's some kind of mermaid show. I think it was called Mermaid Facts or Fiction. I believe that's what it was called, but I might be wrong on that. But those two pieces of footage, they blew me away. Those were amazing. And see, I always thought mermaids weren't real. I always thought that was a goofy thing, and that was just one of those old sea tales that sailors would tell because they've been out to sea too long and they miss chicks and they don't get to see women, and they see some kind of like walrus or something out of the corner of their eye and think it's a mermaid. I always thought it was horse crap, you know what I mean? Yeah. But that documentary really changed my mind because those two pieces of footage, they were just so plausible. I mean, they were so real, you know what I mean? That I just don't see how that could have been faked. And if they were faked, then you have a respected scientist that is throwing his reputation away by faking footage, you know what I mean? And then you have an oil company that doesn't have anything to do with mermaids faking footage, which makes no sense either.
I mean, I seen that. I think I remember that. I'd have to check it out again. But the funny thing is, when you were talking about I don't want to get out of this, but we were talking about the Red Giant. That was actually George Norrie, who does, what's it? The show on the radio on 6:40 a.m. It used to be Art Bell. I don't know if you ever listened to him before. I forget what it was on their show. Like, they do a thing and he talks about all the stuff we talk about. He was famous for it, and then he retired and he came back and he had a thing on Sirius and he came back, and then George Norrie took over, and it was Coast to Coast. That's what it was. I don't know if you ever listened to that. Was who that was. That was George Norrie talking to them. And that was from Coast to Coast. That's a famous show that I used to listen to when I was younger. And they would talk about vampires. And that's another thing. Check out Coast to Coast website. If you're all into this, George Norrie does it now. But Art Bell is famous for that because he had even had Maynard on his show because he was so Maynard from Tool. I know you know who that is, Tool the band. Was so intrigued by him, he went on his show, and he actually, and if you ever seen Art Bell's like this, like Spock, kind of like smart like that, and he had Maynard on because Maynard loved him so much. But this guy would talk about all this, like the giants and the Nephilim and the end of the world, and it would come on every night, except he didn't do Sundays. But I would sit there and listen, and George Norrie was his backup, but he ended up taking over the show. And they had some other guy, but I would listen to this stuff, and they actually had exorcisms. And if anybody ever wants to check them out, they're on 6 a.m. still. That's my thing. I don't know what they are, but it's Coast to Coast. You can look up their website. They're the ones that show a lot of the stuff that comes out, like with the dragon. I saw that on the online. They do a lot of shows about you stuff. You would really like them, James. You like all this kind of stuff like me. But if you ever want to check it out, that's who was doing that show. I was going to remind you earlier when I was watching that video you sent, I was watching the guy talk to Marines, and it was George Norrie doing the video. And that was kind of funny because I listened to that show. I haven't for a while, but I would listen to some stuff like about giants and the Nephilim. That's where I started hearing about the Nephilim, from that show. That's why it's kind of funny. Just like you sent me that picture of that giant, and I think it's in Japan or China. I thought it was in China, but it's this 15-foot giant was walking around. So yeah, a lot of this stuff is very interesting, and that's why I like it. I love doing this stuff. And I know you do too. So, it's very interesting. There's stuff out there that we'll never know, and we don't want to know.
And most of it is based on reality. You know what I mean? Even some of the stuff that's a little far-fetched, it's based on something that was real. I mean, whenever you have legends and you have mythologies from different areas of the world, almost all the time they are based on something realistic that either is the actual thing they're talking about, or it's something that is an actual biological animal that they are attributing other properties to that the animal doesn't possess. You know what I mean? I mean, you have a lot of, like with cryptid creatures, a lot of those things they said didn't exist, like the silverback gorilla. You know, that was supposedly a made-believe, make-up, fairy tale creature, and then they found them in the Congo, and now they study them. The coelacanth was supposedly a sea creature that had went extinct millions of years ago, until one washed up on the coast of Madagascar, and now they recognize that they're still out there. The giant squid was supposedly something just of legend that did not exist until they found them with a deep sea sub, and then one washed up on the beach as well. So a lot of these things they say don't exist, and they laugh at you when you talk about them, and then they find one, and all of a sudden they act like they never laughed at you, like it's just the most normal thing in the world. Like, nobody would say when you're talking about a silverback gorilla now that you're retarded, or you're full of crap, or you don't know what you're talking about. They wouldn't say that. They wouldn't say that about the giant squid now either. They wouldn't say, "Oh man, you're crazy." You know what I mean? Because there's proof that they exist, and I think you're going to have the exact same thing happen with Bigfoot. You're going to have the exact same thing happen with the Loch Ness Monster. I mean, those two especially, I really truly believe that they exist, because you're talking about hundreds of thousands of eyewitness accounts. Okay? Now, let's say that out of all the eyewitness accounts of Bigfoot and all the eyewitness accounts of the Loch Ness Monster, let's just say there's 100,000 sightings of each. Okay? There's many more than that, but let's just, for the sake of argument and for easy math, let's say there's 100,000. Okay, now let's say that 90% of those sightings are completely made up. They're either completely made up, or they're cases of mistaken identity where they see a bear and they think it's a Bigfoot, or whatever, or a school of fish and they think it's a Loch Ness Monster. Okay, so let's say 90% of those are complete nonsense and not true. So that leaves 10% of the sightings which are plausible. Okay, that's still 10% of 100,000 is still 10,000 eyewitness accounts that are plausible, that are things that can't be explained away. And when you have that many people saying the exact same thing and giving the exact same descriptions, it's that old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, if it was a court of law and it was a murder case, it would only take one eyewitness to convict somebody and put them to death. Here we have 10,000 or more eyewitness accounts that are plausible accounts. So whenever you have that kind of thing going on, I mean, there's something there. Do I think that Bigfoot is some monster that creeps around the dark and is dangerous? No, I think it's a Gigantopithecus. I think it's a early relative of mankind. Same thing with the Loch Ness Monster. I don't think the Loch Ness Monster is some crazy monster. That's silly. It's most likely a coelacanth, which was a prehistoric aquatic creature. You know what I mean? That matches the description perfectly. I believe these things managed to survive, and now they're here. And we're seeing them, and we don't know that they're still here, so we say they're monsters or whatever, or some kind of magical creatures, but they're not. They're just biological. And like with the thing with the dragon, okay, if that footage that we watched wasn't fake, if it was real footage, and that was a real thing flying around, then the question is, was it a dragon or was it a pterodactyl? Okay? Now, pterodactyls didn't look like that. They weren't long like that thing was. Okay? A pterodactyl had the pointy beak coming out, the big pointy beak, the little stubby feet, the giant wingspan, and the tiny body. It was mostly wings. In that video, the wings were only a small portion of the creature's body. The rest was just a long lizard-like body. And it had the tail with the little triangle-like thing on the end of it, and then it had the wings, and it had the iconic dragon-looking head. So, if it was a real creature we were watching on that video, I would say 99.9% it was a dragon and not a pterodactyl, because it just doesn't match the physical characteristics of what a pterodactyl looks like, or at least what we think it looks like from the fossil record.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, we don't really know what they look like anyway. We're just going by fossil records. But you're right. What I'm saying is, it also could have been a drake. And it looks like a drake to me because a dragon, the one they had in the sky, yes, but that looked like a drake to me. And it's pretty similar. They're just smaller dragons, but that thing looked real to me. And they actually had, the first picture of it's pretty damn clear. That would be almost impossible to fake, unless you paid somebody that what we saw was probably a dragon. I know people are going to think we're out of our mind, and I know people do that, but I don't really care what they think. I never have anyway, and neither do you. But I'm just saying that, because like I told people before, dragons are probably one of my favorite creatures. Just they're so magical, and just always been fascinated with drakes and dragons. And I also like Jason the Argonauts. You remember the Hydra, that giant? I always like stuff like that. And Cyclops, and all those old movies. I always liked them too. Seven Seas, Sinbad. But I like the creature, the dragon, all together because it's always been fascinating to me. And God, we might. I hate to say it, but you might have actually seen one.
I have a very interesting.
I don't hate to say it.
And very frightening theory here. Okay? And hear me out before you laugh at me, because this is going to sound insane, but there is logic behind it and there is evidence behind it. It's possible that we are seeing a lot more of these kind of creatures because it's the end times. It's nearing the end. Okay? The Bible talks about in Daniel and in Revelations, it talks about the end of times. When the end of the world comes, and it says that the end times are going to be as in the days of Noah. Okay, now the modern scholars, they like to say, well, that means that there's going to be terrorism and hedonism and people, having sexual immorality and all that. Now, all that did take place in the time of Noah. Okay, so they're 100% right there. But what they tend to forget was there was also a lot of other things going on in the time of Noah. Part of the reason for the flood was not only to wipe out mankind's wickedness, but also to wipe out the Nephilim. Because at that time, the Nephilim, which were the giants we were talking about, were running wild, eating people and destroying things and just being nuisances, okay? And some of them died during the flood, but some survived the flood. So you had the Nephilim going on. You had a lot of sorcery going on in that time. The Bible talks about. You had all kinds of stuff like that going on. So it could be possible that because we are reaching the end times, a lot of these things are either waking up or coming back or coming out of hiding or what have you. Maybe that's why we're seeing a hell of a lot more Bigfoot sightings, a hell of a lot more Loch Ness sightings, a hell of a lot more dragon sightings, UFO sightings, giant sightings, everything. It could be that we're entering the end times, and that is why all these things are popping up now and coming back. And imagine if that continues and gets worse like the Bible says. I mean, if I'm right and that's what's happening, then it's going to get worse because the Bible talks about it getting a lot worse before the rapture. So, I mean, we could very well have 500-foot giants walking down the streets like they did in the times of the Bible. Because in the Bible it talks about when the angels came down and had children with human women, how the children they had were 300 cubits in height. Now 300 cubits, 1 cubit is equal to almost 2 feet. So you're talking in between 500 and 600 foot tall giants that roam the earth. I mean, that's what the Bible says.
Yeah.
And they have found skeletons where the skulls, where a normal sized average man is only as big as one of the teeth of these skulls. Okay, so if you extrapolate that out, that's around a 500-foot creature. These things existed. I mean, we have skeletal evidence that they existed. I've seen it. So if these things make a comeback, imagine that. Right. Imagine on the streets of LA a 500-foot giant walking down the street and smashing shit. I mean, just think of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from the Ghostbusters movie. I mean, that's the kind of scale that we might be looking at here. That's scary.
Well, I don't doubt that, but you're right, because you're right. There were 500 feet. There also says that you'll see evil that you've never seen before will be unleashed on the earth. So you're right. It could be true, because there was 500-foot giants. There was, I mean, if you read the book, Enoch saw things that weren't supposed to see with man, and they were weird looking creatures, and then God took them away. So I mean that's probably where we got with these giants, and they were supposedly mutated, because if you remember what he said, that they became horrible looking creatures, so they were mutant. They were probably breeding with each other, and there's even talk of, like, with animals, like they were breeding with other animals, and that's where I think you got the behemoth from in the Bible. And they were making, like, because it says at the end of the world, the king comes out of the sky. I think it was 11 crowns, or 7 crowns, and with so many heads. And think about that. If you think about, God probably got rid of all these creatures because they were probably breeding with everything. Like if they breeded with a goat, or like, that's where you got the centaur. If you think about all this, this is where all these creatures probably came from, was that these things were all breeding together. And you got, God got pissed off because they were abominations, and he got Noah and he flooded them all out. But it says in some parts that Noah might have let the kings, two of the giants on, or they snuck on his boat because they found out. And there's a story behind that one too. I have to look that one up. That they could have hit away on his ship, and he didn't know either, and they survived. And that's how we still had giants and stuff like Goliath. But yeah, you're pretty much right on that. That would be very frightening if that's the truth.
And if you really examine it, I mean, it fits. There's so many things that fit. The Bible talks about the signs that must take place before the end times. They talk about Israel becoming a state again. Okay, that happened in the 40s. They talk about Israel being back to its original size. Okay, its original borders. That happened in 1967. It had never happened since the time of the Bible until then. That's the first time it happened. They talk about the sexual immorality, and then they go into a little bit of detail on the sexual immorality. They talk about homosexuality running wild. We have that now. They talk about bestiality. We have that now. That's a very popular kink with a lot of weird people. They talk about incest quite a bit, about sons laying with their mothers and fathers laying with their daughters. That is a very popular kink on the internet as well, that you're seeing a hell of a lot of now, is all this incest stuff that's going on. They had a lot of pedophilia running wild, and that's a huge thing now. I mean, especially by a lot of the people that run things is a big thing, as we found out in the WikiLeaks and the Podesta emails. So, I mean, there's a lot of that stuff going on, and it's kind of crazy that a book that was written over 2,000 years ago talks about all this stuff that's happening now, and they even talk about in the Bible. There's a part where he's talking about the Antichrist, and he says, I saw the Antichrist come down as lightning from the heavens. Do you remember that part in the Bible? If you translate that into the ancient Hebrew,
I remember that.
If you translate that into the ancient Hebrew, it's Barak Bama. Okay, is how that actually translates in the ancient Hebrew. And it's kind of crazy that we just had a president called Barack Obama, right? Which is very, very close to that. And it's actually, I think, if you do the grammatically correct, that would be what it was, Barack Obama. And the weird thing is, Barack Obama is not Barack Obama's actual name. His actual name is Barry Suerto. But he changed it to Barack Obama. So he actually changed his name to fit biblical prophecy. I'm not saying he's the Antichrist. I don't know, because mankind can't know who the Antichrist is. That's stated in the Bible as well. We're going to think a lot of people are the Antichrist that aren't. So I'm not saying Barack Obama is the Antichrist. I'm saying, isn't it interesting that they talk about that they saw, it's either Antichrist or Satan coming. It depends on which translation you look at, as lightning from the heavens, and that is literally translated in the ancient Hebrew as Barak Bama. So I mean, just there's a lot of weird stuff that tie in with that ancient prophecy that's happening now. You know what I mean? And it's just strange, you know? And like I said, I'm not saying Barack Obama's the Antichrist. More than likely what's happening here is you have the New World Order, the Illuminati, those kind of groups which are satanic and trying to bring about the end of the world, who think, hey, why don't we put somebody in place here and call him Barack Obama, because that is the actual translation of what it says in the Bible, right? So if we want to bring about the Antichrist, why don't we manufacture the Antichrist? Yeah. That's most likely what happened. It's most likely not even the real Antichrist yet. But what I'm saying is a lot of this stuff has taken place. There are no major signs left that need to happen before the rapture. Everything has been done. So it's just a matter of waiting for it to happen at this point. So if things continue to get worse, like the Bible says they will, we very well could see 500-foot giants walking down the road. You know, we very well could see all kinds of weird creatures running around our streets of our cities. And that is not only frightening, but it's also fascinating and amazing to me at the same time. Like, it would be a scary thing, but at the exact same time, it would be so damn interesting to see all this stuff, you know what I mean? Now, granted, in a terrible way, but it would just be such an interesting thing to see. And it just blows me away to think of it, you know?
And I agree. Well, the problem is there's still stuff that needs to be Israel needs to be attacked too. You got to remember that. And 10 years of peace. And I think that's starting with Trump, because I still think Trump is going to win another 4 years. But like I said, I think you're right, because like they said, these lakes that turned to red in China last year, and rivers and oceans that turned red, and they had no explanation of it. They had birds dying out of nowhere, animals dying, weird sightings of UFOs and creatures. And it says in the Bible we'll see a lot of evil things that you would never think of that exist or have. And if it has to do with the devil, think about it. If you think about all this, you got a giant running around. Yeah, you're right. That would be scary as hell, but it's probably not going to be good. It's not going to be on our side, just like dragons or whatever the hell's flying around. With Bigfoot, I think they've been running around for a while. I think they actually have a tie with us. I think they're actually good. Other than other things that's running around, I think they're going to be involved in this in some way or somehow. Maybe sound crazy too, like you were saying. But I think they're not our enemies and what we need to worry about. I think there's things that, like you said, that we don't want to know that exist, and they're going to start coming out more and more to the end of the world, and I think you're right on that.
Yeah, the reason I didn't include Israel being attacked and none of the attacks hurting it, the reason I know about that, the reason I didn't include that is because I don't consider that a major sign that happens before the rapture and then the tribulation period, because that takes place almost immediately before the rapture. Once that happens, once all of the nations of the world go against Israel, which they're already doing in the UN, they're already against Israel, okay? We were pretty much the only people that were backing them, and we just allowed a resolution of condemnation to pass in the UN. We didn't veto it because of Obama and John Kerry. We let it happen. Okay? So even we have turned our back on Israel at this point. But once an actual military strike is launched against Israel and the bombs just don't go off, or whatever's going to happen to where they're not hurt at all, once that crazy thing happens and the earth pretty much swallows up the other armies and everything, once that takes place, literally you better be looking at the sky, because the rapture is going to happen any minute at that point. We're within hours or days at that point of the rapture. Because that takes place in prophecy, directly before the rapture happens. And then after the rapture happens, then the Antichrist rises. Yeah. And he offers the world an explanation for what happened while all these people disappeared. And he offers peace, and he takes over the entire world. That's when you have the tribulation period, which is set for 7 years, but it will only last half of that, because God shortens the time because it's so terrible. And then you got all kinds of crazy stuff that happens in the tribulation period that's horrible, but God willing, we're not going to be here for any of that, because we'll have been raptured and we won't be on earth anymore. You know what I mean? But That's why I didn't include that in the major signs. I mean, all the other major signs have happened.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, even if you do get taken away, like I said before, it doesn't mean you're going to go to hell. You're just going to have to deal with the 7 years of tribulation. And remember, like I've said before, never take the mark of the beast. Even if the worsting scenario that you get captured and you're probably going to be killed in a really horrible way, please don't take the mark of the beast, because you still can end up going to heaven. If you just got the rapture, people disappear like they say, that doesn't mean that everybody who's on earth is still going to go to hell. You're just still going to, you have a choice to take the mark, or you end up, dying some crazy way. But that's a whole nother story we'll talk about. But with that, it is pretty remarkable how these things are coming out of nowhere, and it's been like the last 10, 15, 20 years, and all these creatures are coming out of the blue now, and we're seeing them more and more frequently. But you also got to remember, now we got better technology, more satellites, more cameras, more internet computers, so people are catching things easier now.
Yeah, but it's also a lot more. I mean, I'm somebody that's into this kind of stuff, and even I find it hard to believe some of the stuff that I know is true now. You know what I mean? And for the average American and the average person around the world, I mean, everybody listening to this show, whether you're listening live or whether you're going to be listening to the replay, or if you catch it on YouTube or wherever you catch it, just think to yourself for a minute. Just stop what you're doing and think a minute. Think about the things that you know to be true now. And then think 5 years before now, or 10 years ago, and think, if somebody would have walked up to you and said, hey, this is what's going on. There's pedophiles running wild in the government, and top people are running pedophile rings. If they would have said that, or hey, the government can turn on your cell phone remotely and film you and listen in on your conversations, look at your webcam. They have every single text message, every single email, everything you've ever sent. Okay? They have it. The NSA does. If somebody would have told you these things that are actually true and happening now, that we have proof of, you would have said, there's no way. This is a fairy tale. That's not real. You're crazy. You know what I mean? If somebody would have told you, hey, they're going to have film of actual mermaids. They're going to have actual giant skeletons. You know what I mean? If somebody would have told you these things that we know are true because we've seen them, as fantastic as they sound, they're true. If somebody would have told you that 5 or 10 years ago, you'd have said, dude, you need to be locked up. You need a straitjacket. You're out of your damn mind. That's insane. What are you talking about, idiot? That's what I was saying 5 or 10 years ago. Okay? But I've seen these things myself, and it's like, this stuff is real. So much of this stuff that you thought wasn't real, that you thought was just stories, it's all real. And it just blows me away. And that's what I'm saying. You can listen to what we're saying today, and you can have that same reaction if you want. You are free to do so. You can say, you're out of your mind, you're stupid, you're crazy, you're making crap up just to get ratings, whatever, right? You can say that. That's fine. But do me a favor. Do a search on it, okay? Get on Google, get on YouTube, and actually search and find it. Look at it yourself. It's there. You can see it for yourself. Before you say we're crazy, look it up. And then you'll see that you're crazy too, because you're going to believe the same thing when you see it for yourself, And it's just 10 years ago, if you would have told me any of this stuff, I would have said you're nuts. But now there's so much of it that we know is true. You know what I mean? We know it's true. Just the other day I saw John Kerry gave a press conference, and he admitted in the press conference that Building 7 of the World Trade Center was brought down by a controlled demolition. Okay? That's something our government has been telling us is not true, and has been telling us is conspiracy theory, and if you believe that, you're an idiot, and you're crazy, and all this kind of stuff. They've been saying that the whole time, since that day in 2001. They've been saying that. People have been saying that's what happened. Okay? They found traces of thermate that were used to destroy the building. John Kerry admitted that they brought that building down on purpose. Okay? It's on tape. If you go to my YouTube channel, just go to YouTube, type James Hershey Jr. in the search, and look at my videos. I put the actual video of John Kerry saying it on my YouTube channel, so you can go and see it for yourself. Okay? That's something that was a conspiracy theory, and now there's absolute proof. Now, does that mean that the government brought down the 2 twin towers? Who knows? But it does mean that they brought down Building 7. Because Building 7 was the smaller building that was beside the Twin Towers that also collapsed that day. And it was never hit by a plane. It was never hit by anything. But it fell. The same way the Twin Towers fell.
Nope.
And we have proof now that that was an inside job.
Right.
At least
They
Building
did.
7 was.
Well, that's a whole nother thing we could talk about one day. But my point, the point is, everybody needs to, they could think we're crazy and we're out of our mind. Go look it up on YouTube. But I mean, don't think every video there is going to be right and right on the button. But there's some truth to every story. Look it up. Look out the history. Because like I'll tell people, my top 5 all-time animals or zoology or cryptology, all these creatures and mythological creatures, my favorite ones are always been Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, dragons, werewolves, and vampires. And there's other ones, the paranormal ghost, I'd say. Those are the ones I've always really been interested in, and dinosaurs too. But those existed. So, I mean, people believe dinosaurs existed, and we have proof of it with bones and stuff. Why couldn't these creatures exist either? That's why I don't understand why people are saying, oh, yeah, that's impossible. We had giant-ass lizards running around and giant sharks and giant animals running around. Why couldn't we have these creatures? That's what I'm saying. So you can think whatever you want. In the end of the day, there's something out there, and we're going to find it, and people aren't, are going to change their whole opinion. Oh, you're not crazy anymore. Just like they said, 20, 30 years now, something else is going to be found that they thought we were crazy about.
And they actually had a dig in, it was either New Mexico or Arizona. I believe it was New Mexico, but it was one of those 2 states. They did an archaeological dig, and they found a piece of stone, a section of rock that had dinosaur footprints actually in the rock, which was very cool. And what made it special was underneath the dinosaur footprints was a human footprint. So you had a human footprint, and what you saw was the toes and halfway back the foot, and then at the halfway back the foot point is where the dinosaur had stepped on that footprint. So you actually have a human footprint, a modern human footprint, barefoot, underneath a dinosaur print. What makes that special and why that's important is because we have been told our entire lives that human beings and dinosaurs did not exist at the same time. That's why they say the Bible isn't true, because they say there's millions of years that separate dinosaurs from when human beings finally evolved. But there in stone is proof that human beings existed at least at the same time as dinosaurs, if not before. Because in order for a human footprint to be underneath a dinosaur footprint, they had to have existed at the same time. And you can say something off the wall like, well, it could have been time travel. That could have been why they did it. Even if that was the case, that meant some human being time traveled back to when dinosaurs were and was in the same place as a dinosaur at the same time, so I'm still right. But why would you be walking around barefoot if you time traveled? If you have technology enough to go back in time, I'm sure you have a pair of sneakers. You know what I mean? That's all I'm saying about that. But that proves that they existed at the same time. So what you need to realize is we have been lied to our entire lives by our government, by our schools, by everything. There are so many things that we are taught that are not true. They're just plain out not true. I mean, there's so many examples. One great example I always use is The whole myth of George Washington, where he chopped down a cherry tree, and they said, "Did you chop down that cherry tree, George?" And he said, "I cannot tell a lie. I chopped down that cherry tree, Dad." That never happened. Okay, it never happened. Not at all. Not even a little bit true. It's completely false. There are so many things like that in our history that we're taught one thing in school, and then you actually learn the truth later through research, and you find out you've been lied to, and you're being lied to about mankind and dinosaur existing at the same time as well. Okay, you can think I'm crazy, that's fine. I seen it. Okay, I seen it in a scientific journal. They actually showed the photographs and everything of it. They destroyed the site since then, because once it was on national news for like a day and a half, and then they came in and they destroyed the site. They brought in construction equipment and ripped it apart so that it wouldn't be there anymore. You know why they did that? Because it disproves all of their crap they've been lying to us about. Okay? Realize that evolution is only a theory, but it's taught in school like it's a law. Okay? Whether you agree with evolution or not, just think about that for a second. Here's something that is only a theory. There has never been a missing link found that links primate ape to modern man. There is no missing link in the fossil record at all. Never been found, does not exist, complete and totally missing, okay? But they teach it to you like it's the truth. And if you believe anything but their theory, then you're crazy, you're stupid, and you're going to fail. But it's not a law, it's not the truth. It's a theory. They don't know. I mean, we just found out just last week. I read a report from the American Medical Association that now claims that eating high cholesterol foods such as eggs, it doesn't lead to high cholesterol at all. That's not what causes it. But yet, for our entire lives, they've been telling us we can't enjoy yummy food because we're going to get high cholesterol and die. Instead, we have to eat things that taste like cardboard. But guess what, people? Not true. And as far as diet goes, so many times that crap has happened.
Nope.
So many times. They tell you, oh, you got to eat all this fat. That's good for you. Oh, wait, no, don't eat that. It'll kill you. Oh, you got to eat all this stuff here. That's, don't have sugar because sugar's terrible for you. Here, have Splenda. Here, have Sweet and Low. Oh, what? Aspartame, saccharin? Oh, it causes cancer. Oh, crap. Well, maybe you better have sugar. Oh, wait, no, you can't have sugar now either because now you're going to get diabetes. They have no idea, people. They don't know. This shit changes time after time after time. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Science is just guesswork in a white coat. That's all it is. That's what people need to realize. This stuff is not in stone fact. It's all theory. And it keeps changing constantly. And if you want to know that for sure, just read the scientific papers they put out. The ones they put out this year are going to contradict what they put out last year. I mean, remember growing up, we thought dinosaurs were these big, scary lizards? Well, now come to find out they were birds, covered in feathers. Didn't even look like lizards at all. The mighty T-Rex that stood on its hind legs and was so ferocious, and this big, bad carnivore? Oh, well, not really. He couldn't stand up straight because it would break his spine, so he actually ran kind of horizontal, and he wasn't even a predator, really. He was more of a scavenger. Oh, man, sorry, we got all that wrong. You know what I mean? Constantly, people, constantly. Every day I learn more stuff that isn't true. So what I'm saying, take it all with a grain of salt. Do your own research. Don't believe what you're told.
Yep, and I agree.
Because they lie. They lie all the time. You're being controlled. That's about it. Well, we're almost out of time for this show. Man, this one flew by quick too, didn't it? We got like 6 minutes. So let me say a quick shout out to Valley Vapors in Woodstock. Let me say thank you to all of our vets. We love you guys. Thank you for your service. You are true heroes. Shout out to Carry the Fallen. Does a great charity. Does a lot for the vets coming home. And Bravo Tickets Las Vegas. Thank you guys. They're always liking our stuff and checking out our shows. We appreciate that. Shout out to Sirius and to iHeart. Thank you guys for your interest in the shows. We appreciate it. And hopefully we can work something out here soon. Anybody you want to say hi to, old boy?
I'll just say thanks for the listeners and everybody you just said thank you. And whoever these independent, other radio stations that listen to you, thank you. We're really appreciated, and thank you for letting us do this show because it's been very interesting to talk about some of this stuff. We'll keep talking about it too because it seems like a lot of people like it. So, and it interested us all also. So, yeah, thank you, people, and thank you to my family and the radio show.
Yeah, and like old boy said, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate you. We love you. Check out the YouTube channel. Just type in my name, James Hershey Jr. You can pull it up. I put all the old shows there. So each time we do a show, like this show will be on the YouTube channel as well, and every show we do. And that way, if you miss a show, you can't listen live or you can't find it on the playback, then you can always go to the YouTube channel and watch the video and you can see it. Check out my books. They're on Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, all that jazz. It's I Am Legion, Surrogate of Souls, Rise of the Revenant. That's the Legion series. And then I have Call of the Wind Spirits. So give those a read. I'm sure you'll love them. Lots of people have. And once again, just thank everybody so much for listening. And we will catch you next time.